Well, howdy there, all y'all out in YouTube land. Glad that you're joining me today. My name is Disciple, and this channel you found is called Not By Sight. And one of the goals for my channel, and one of the goals in particular for this video, is to help you be more successful at your next camping, hiking, or backpacking adventure. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most underrated, non-talked about topics in all of the backpacking world, and that is tent stakes. There's lots and lots of information out there about shelters, and everybody wants to know what's the lightest, what's the best, what's the strongest or the cheapest shelter available. Yet almost no one talks about how to anchor that shelter down to the ground. Come a big storm, big winds or rains, you're going to really want that thing to stay standing. So come along with me today as we explore how it is that you can anchor your shelter and have a more enjoyable overnight experience out there in the woods and on the trail. I've got several different stakes. Now, this is not a comprehensive list of all of the stakes available, but these are some that I've had on hand. So first, we're going to look at an MSR snow stake. Now, this stake I actually bought not for winter camping, but instead to use as a trowel to dig a cat hole and hopefully get the dirt out. And if push came to shove, it could always be used as a stake. Now, let me just say this. It doesn't work at all for a trowel. Don't use one of these things. You can sort of dig a little bit, but it's very difficult to get the dirt out of a hole with one of these things. So I have no idea how it works in the snow, but by the design, I can imagine it would work pretty well. This thing will not work in rocky soil. It will not work in hard packed dirt, but in very loose sand and some snow, this is definitely a stake that you want to check out. Let's go ahead and get the weight on it. We're going to talk primarily in ounces. This thing looks like it's exactly 1 ounce or 28 grams. Next up on our tent stake review or tent stake look at here is the traditional aluminum little shepherd hook. This is the cheap stake that comes with nearly every tent that you get at kind of more of a low-end bargain store type place. These aluminum stakes work. They do bend, but they don't hardly break. You can bend them back. These things will last. They have pretty good holding power. They're fairly easily removed, and they can be wedged down between rocks. Not a bad option for about $1.25. Let's see what this thing weighs in grams. Looks like it's about 15 grams or 0.5 ounces. That's what that thing is weighing in at. So next we're going to get into some stakes that I actually used on the Appalachian Trail. And here is your traditional shepherd's hook. Now this is a titanium one that I bought from Zpacks, and I believe this is called a 6.5 inch. So it's a little bit heavier than their ultralightest one, which is 6 inch, but it's also got a little better holding power. One of the advantages to a shepherd's hook is it's extremely simple, and in very hard packed ground or in super rocky ground, this may be one of the only options that will work for you. So I always carry a couple of shepherd hook stakes. Now, these don't hold the greatest, but again, in super hard soil, if you can get it down, it's going to hold fairly well. Typically, what I would use these shepherd hook stakes for are the sidewall tie-outs, where you just are getting a little headroom, maybe a little bit of extra wind resistance, but I'm not going to anchor like the doors on my non-freestanding shelter with one of these, because these just simply don't hold quite well enough. But they are bulletproof. These things, you can drive them down between rocks and they will last. They're also pretty lightweight for what you get. So again, I always carry a couple of shepherd's hooks. Looks like it's coming in at 0.3 ounces or about 7 grams. So that's always a good option. Now here we're going to talk about you talk about bulletproof stakes. This is an MSR stake. I do not know the model, but if you can see, it's completely square. It has a very small little like knitting needle style hook on the top to hold your guy line, and it is about 6 inches long. And this thing is a bomber. I'm talking if you are in rocky soil and you need to get a steak down in that rocks that isn't going to fail you, this is a steak you want to consider. This on the AT, when I didn't have a scale with me, was one of my favorite steaks. I could trust this steak to hold and hold up extremely well. I really enjoyed carrying these steaks. Now, after getting home and weighing them, they're a little heavier than some other options. But you talk about a bomber steak. This is one of the most underrated ones. I love this MSR square steak. It is 0.8, oh no, 8 grams, sorry. 8 grams or 0.3 ounces. Again, the square MSR. We had to order these on Amazon. I bought one at Mountain Crossings down in Georgia, not far from the beginning of the Appalachian Trail, and really fell in love with it. So I bought a bunch more, and now I carry these in my kit. By the way, on tent steaks, real quick, I ran into some people, especially early on the Appalachian Trail, that didn't carry as many steaks as their tent had guy out points. And what they ended up doing was setting up, and the wind would blow, and their rain flies would flap, their doors would blow open. There would be a lot of movement in their shelter when gusts of wind came up. And it gets gusty, especially in the early spring and in the late fall. You better expect some strong winds. And so we're going to talk about other options than just carrying steaks here at the end of this video. But I want to encourage you to carry not only as many steaks as you need for your guy outs, all of your stake out points, but even about 2 extra. And that's where kind of like these shepherd's hooks come in. I would always carry about the amount I needed and maybe 2 more of these shepherd hooks. But again, I got another tip for you at the end of this video, so stay tuned. All right, we're going to talk now about perhaps my favorite steak that I'm carrying, and that is this blue little sonic steak that Zpacks offers. I don't know if they're the only provider for this or whatever, but I know I got the blue sonic steak from Zpacks, and it is a 6-inch little 3-edged, almost like a Y steak, and very similar to the MSR Groundhog and Mini Groundhog, except for this is lighter, and I believe it's as strong. This steak, for the weight, the holding power, the durability, the drivability, and trust, this steak, if you had one steak to carry, I believe this would be the one that I would carry for a range of soil conditions. And by the way, each steak has kind of a special purpose. They're not all good in all soils. Some you want for hard packed soils, some for looser soils. This is a good middle of the road steak that'll work in hard pack. You can kind of tap this thing down with a rock and drive it down in some pretty tough stuff, and it'll hold real well in some loose soil also. I trust this for not only my corners of my tent and the guy out points, but also the doors. So this is an awesome steak. I believe this is as light as any that I have in my setup today. 0.2 ounces or 7 grams. So for the holding power and the cost, the Blue Sonic 6-inch from Zpacks is, I believe, top of my list. I went ahead and got a couple of carbon steaks to try out this past spring and this summer, and I tell you what, I can't complain. They hold well. They push down in some pretty tough soil. They are fairly light, but not as light as the Sonic. They are a little more fragile. So I don't really know why you would want to carry a carbon steak when you can get something like the Blue Sonic that is as light or lighter, holds better, and is definitely more durable. But I think it's kind of cool carrying around a carbon steak, so that's why I went ahead and got a couple of these. And I cannot say anything bad. They've held up well for me, but I'm super careful with them also. And they hold really well in the strong winds. So, something to consider. Let's see what this is weighing. Looks like it's 6 grams, or 0.2 ounces. So the carbon core steak is definitely a consideration. And again, I think it's just kind of cool carrying around some carbon. So this is a steak that I used I used the most of these on my Appalachian Trail thru hike. And this is a V steak, a titanium V steak that I got from Zpacks. And hopefully you can see it well there, but it's got like these little holes in it to reduce weight. This is a very strong holding stake. However, because of the titanium that's used and these little perforations, they bend almost immediately. I never really had one fail on me, but I did have them break and get extremely sharp here. So I had to throw a couple of them away as I used them. They don't drive into hard ground at all. They bend and the tip will curl up on you. So these are not great for hard soil. They are great for looser soil. They hold very well, but they're not the most durable. Again, they bend quite easily. They're a little on the heavier side also. So this is not one of my favorite stakes. In fact, I'm not sure if I'm even carrying any of these anymore because there are other options that are lighter and stronger and hold as well. So it's an option. Looks like it's 0.4 ounces. 11 grams. So that's why I'm not carrying these anymore. They're heavy and they're not any better holding and they're even more fragile than lots of other options. So let's look at some commercially available tent stakes. And first we're going to look at MSR's Groundhog. Now one of my favorite traditional style tents that I carry on canoe trips is my MSR Mother Hubba tent. And one of the awesome things about MSR products, at least their shelters, is they send some quality stakes along with their shelters. And this is a great example. It's an MSR Groundhog stake, and it's that same design as the Zpacks Blue Sonic stake. It's got that 3-prong, Y style stake made of aluminum. Bomber, bulletproof. This thing will hold well in loose soil and you can drive it down in some pretty serious rocks. So these are great consideration. I wouldn't take these backpacking just because they're so large and so heavy, but I would definitely use these, like say in the boundary waters with a little heavier tent when I'm looking for some severe storm protection. These stakes are great. And you know what? Stick one in your pack, maybe two, if weight isn't much of an issue. And carry these things to really bulletproof your tent when the winds are strong. So along with the Groundhog comes the mini Groundhog, and that's the smaller little brother of the big Groundhog. Now this is very similar to my favorite stake, which is that Sonic. So this is almost the same thing, just a little heavier. So this might be a touch more durable, but I haven't had any problem with any of them, with the blue or these, so I can't really say. But I know this is great in rocky soil, tough soil, but also holds real well even in some looser soil. So the mini Groundhog's coming in at 10 grams, or it's saying 0.4 on my scale. And the big full-size Groundhog is weighing 0.5 ounces, so a half ounce or 13 grams. So the last stake we're going to look at that comes commercially available is a kind of a boring stake. This is what Big Agnes sends with like their Copper Spur or Fly Creek tents. It's this very simple little V stake. It's just a plain old little aluminum V, not very strong, don't hold that well. They don't even have a little string at the top to help pull them out. It's just a boring little stake for top of the line, mega high priced shelters. This is about the weeniest little stake out there on the market. Personally, I can't stand these stakes. I don't really haven't had any failures. They just bend. They only hold decently. They're kind of heavy. So again, for a top of the line tent, Big Agnes sure doesn't give you much for tent stakes. But it is a tent stake, and we're going to weigh it. So it's coming in at 11 ounces. Yep, 11 grams, 0.4 ounces. So let's talk about how to use a tent stake real quick. And let's pretend that my tent is off to my left, and I've got a guy out point or a corner right here in front of the camera. Now you don't want to take your tent stake and drive it straight in. You definitely don't want to drive it at an angle like this because that means it can pull out in a strong wind. So what you want to do is set your stake at about a 45-degree angle. Pull your guy out point pretty snug and then drive the stake in like this. And I'm telling you, it takes a ton for even something like a shepherd's hook, which is the least holding of all of the tent stakes I've talked about. even a shepherd's hook driven at a 45-degree angle or more away from your tent will hold pretty well. So when you're driving in the stakes, make sure to set them like that. Now, what happens if you lose some stakes, or you didn't bring all of the stakes that you need, or the ground is completely rocky, or maybe like on the Appalachian Trail, there's some elevated tent platforms and you simply can't drive a stake in the ground. The lightest stake out there that you can possibly get is what's already available in the surrounding area, and that would be primarily some rocks. Now, on the Appalachian Trail in particular, there are rocks everywhere. You might be in some places where there aren't rocks, but we're going to talk about a solution for that also. But the good thing about a rock is you can pick a big one. This is just a small one I found outside the house, but you can pick a big old rock. You can make a loop in your guy line and wrap it around the rock, pull the rock out, and it's going to hold extremely well. And in the morning, you loosen your loop, put the rock back where you got it, and you don't carry any extra weight. So don't forget about using rocks, natural material in the area. Rocks are one of the best tent stakes out there because they weigh absolutely nothing throughout the day. All you have to do is go around and grab some, maybe on the way down to get water and on the way back or whatever, but usually rocks are plentiful. So don't forget about using a rock. I'm going to set that down. And the other option are trees. So logs, big old hunks of like firewood, big old blow down limbs. Usually there are laid down logs and limbs all over. And you can break one, you can find one close, drag it over to your tent, whatever, wrap your guy line around the log and set that thing back exactly where you want it. You can put a couple of rocks to hold it, other logs to hold it down, whatever you need. The fact is, or the point is, that logs, like rocks, are absolutely weightless during the day because you're not carrying them with you. And they do a pretty darn good job of anchoring your tent. The other thing, I brought this stick in, is to show you, you can tie down to natural bushes. Bushes, trees, and tree limbs. So don't forget about using already growing material right there by your campsite to anchor your guy line to. Sometimes the best anchor point is up high off the ground to hold your wall up on your tent from blowing down or blowing in. And so a tree limb or a bush, a trunk of a tree, can be a great way to tie out and guy out your shelter for storm protection. So don't forget about using natural material. You may want to throw in a small bundle of the very minimal, tiny little paracord, and that way you can extend your guy line out to anchor to something like a tree. Learn a couple of knots like the sheet bend knot or the bowline knot that you can tie a loop in your rope. You can loop it through your existing guy line, cinch it down, run it off to something. There's another knot you might want to learn called the trucker's hitch. That's a real simple knot. It helps you to tension right down. It's a quick knot. So if you learn a sheet bend, a bowline, and the trucker's hitch knots, you can guy out to nearly anything. Carry a little bit of paracord and you don't have to rely completely on your tent stakes. So hopefully that helps you decide what stake you might want to invest in for your next overnight adventure. If you have any questions or comments or any other stakes that I didn't cover today that you think our viewers would be interested in, comment down below. And if you haven't yet subscribed, I would certainly appreciate it if you'd consider doing so. On this channel, we're going to be exploring lots more gear reviews. You can follow along as I hike and paddle all over the country. So either way, thanks for watching and God bless.